welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm Gail Burke, and I'm here with my co-host, George Binns. Tonight we have a very interesting guest, Mr. Charles Roy, who has done some work in the orphanages in Mexico. I think that you will be interested in some of the information that he is going to give us tonight. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Thank you. It's really great to be here, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about the orphanage.
You're very welcome.
Well, before we get to the orphanage, you're a retired engineer, right?
That's correct.
How long have you been retired?
Since 2006. Biggest mistake I ever made.
Really?
Yeah, I should have done it earlier. I love what I did. Worked for Raytheon Company. I love what I did, but now I've got other things that are really fulfilling.
So how did you get involved with this orphanage?
Well, I was a member of leadership at Second Congregational Church in North Beverly, and as a member of leadership, I used to get publications from the United Church of Christ. And one Saturday afternoon, I'm reading one of the publications, and it was about a couple that instead of going on a safari or a cruise, they decided they would go on a mission trip. And I said to my wife, I said, you know, we could do that. And she said, yes, we could. The very next morning, we're at church, and our associate minister, Reverend Molly Finney-Basquette, got up and said, we need some volunteers to go to an orphanage in Colima, Mexico. My hand was up, and I looked over, and my wife's hand was just as high as mine.
That's great.
And that was in 1999. And we've been going, this year will be our 15th trip to the orphanage. We went down, we fell in love with the children and the staff at the orphanage.
How long do you spend down there when you do go?
It depends on whether, initially we'd go down for 10 days, but now when my wife and I go, we go for a month.
Now, do you stay on the premises?
Yes,
or?
the orphanage was started by a priest probably over 40 years ago. And he built the place brick by brick. And the original brick-making machine is still there, by the way. And one of the, he had 7 buildings now on 3 acres of land. And within one of the buildings was his apartment. Now, he's no longer there. He's passed on, unfortunately. And my wife and I stay right there on campus in their orphanage. And we get woken up in the morning with the kids coming to the window, you know, saying, good morning. And that's the way our day starts.
That's great.
So what do you do when you're down there?
Well, we work on various projects. We never know exactly what the project is, what it's going to be. But if we could bring up slide 1, you'll get an idea of the orphanage in Colima, Mexico. A nice little cobblestone street welcomes you to the orphanage. As you can see in the back, there's a big tower, and that's the church. Now, the orphanage is over 40 years old, so there's a lot of maintenance things that happen when we're down there. We started the CARSA Building Fund to do things that the organization that helps finance it can't afford to do. So we do the extra kinds of things.
So who's the basic sponsor of it?
Well, the Padres started an organization back 35 years ago to provide funding. And it's an organization out of Florida that, with his original investments, was there, plus from his church. So that's the major investment. So but there's also an association. Did he start
in this country?
He was from Florida.
Oh, okay.
And he went to Colima. Look, he had a very unusual affliction. He was susceptible to cold. And we'd be there in 80 degrees, and he'd be there with his jacket all zipped up and cold. So he was looking for a warmer climate, and he found that in Colima. But when he got there, he also found the children of Colima that were abandoned and on the streets. So he's got a couple of women, nuns from the local area, and he bought a pig barn and started the orphanage.
How many children are at the orphanage?
It ranges from 70 to over 110 children will be there. We've seen as many as 110 children when we've been there. But currently, I think there's about 70 children right there at the orphanage right now. If we could bring up slide number 2, the director of the orphanage is Lupita. And my wife calls her Mother Teresa. She's an incredible, resourceful woman, and she has to be because she gets absolutely no help from the government. As a matter of fact, everything that she purchases, like everything else, is taxed at 16.3%. because there's no income tax, but she doesn't get any tax breaks on the property, doesn't get any help at all from the government. Now, when we went down with the church the first time, the church was going every other year. But that wasn't enough for my wife and I. And unfortunately, our associate, Molly, that I told you about, got called to a church in Somerville, and she's now with the First Church in Somerville. And we, the associate position is really a training position, and she got called to the next position. And when she left, I said to her, I said, Molly, is there anything I can do for you? And she said, keep the CASA alive. I said, you mean you want Elaine and I to run the next mission trip? She said, yes, we do. And I said, okay. So we ran the next trip, and
How many people go down with you?
Depends, sometimes up to 21 people. We bring the youth along. And Elaine and I started if you could bring up slide number 3, please. Elaine and I started the CASA Building Fund, all right? Because when we took the first group down, we got someone else trained to help the next associate that came along, which we did. But going every other year was not enough for us. We had fallen in love with this organization, the children and the CASA. And we started the CASA Building Fund. And it's independent from the church, meaning that we didn't want to ask for money and take away from the mission trips that the church was going on. So we relied on our friends in different organizations like the Beverly Kiwanis, like the Good Friday Walk, and other local churches. I spent almost a whole year soliciting money. And again, 100%.
It's not easy to do either.
Pardon me?
It's not easy to do.
No,
to
it's not.
money.
And it's a lot of work, but there's a lot of really good, generous people out there that continue to support us. And the key is that I can tell them that every penny that we've ever gotten in the 10 years I've been doing the CASA Building Fund has gone to the orphanage. We
Now,
pay
do you
all
have
our own
children
expenses.
of your own?
We do. We have 2 great
They're
children.
all grown up?
All grown up and given us, now we have grandchildren. We have one son that has a business here in Beverly, the Green Banana SEO, and he lives over in Wenham. And another son lives in Arlington. He just graduated, last year from Harvard Medical. And he and his wife live in Arlington. So we have our own family.
I'd like to know a little bit more about the children. Are there any age limits as far as...
That's a great question, because
when
the Padre put it together, Gail, he said, no one's going to age out of here. It's called Casa Hoga Huérfanos, with a house home for orphans. And he said they can stay until they're ready to leave. And we know children that are there that are currently in college that we started with, back in 1999, and they're still there. Now, truth be known, they still have to be in at 10 o'clock at night, and they have to, follow all the rules of the CASA. So sometimes they migrate away. And unfortunately, culturally, a lot of these, not every one of the children are orphans. As a matter of fact, probably only 10% of them are orphans. A lot of them come from an equivalent to our Department of Youth Services that are brought there by the government and left there. And then when they get to a working age, all of a sudden a relative shows up and can invite them back home.
Do they ever get adopted out of there?
I've only known of one that's ever gone to the level of adoption, and he was 17 years old, and when it got to the final point, he decided to stay. It's very difficult, Gail, because as I said, when they get down to the bottom of it, someone shows up.
Yeah.
And in order to adopt, you have to make sure you find everybody, and some of them we don't know where the father is, and so on and so forth. So adoption is almost impossible. And we had one, but he decided not to go.
Could you elaborate a little bit on when somebody shows up? I don't get what the meaning behind that is.
What happens is a child will be brought by the Department of Youth Services to the Casa Hoga and left there. And then they'll be there a couple of years, and then all of a sudden when they get to be 14 or 15, an aunt or an uncle will show up at the orphanage and say, that's my nephew, that's my niece, I need them to go back at home.
Yeah.
I'd like to go on and tell you about a couple of stories of the projects, and I'd like to look at photo number 4. Now we were down there in 2005, and this is a truck that's carrying the kids off to catechism class. Now, this is not all that unusual to see the kids in the back of a pickup truck or truck like this. Now, the Dodge was really unique. In order to start the Dodge, you needed two people. One person to turn the crank and someone else to pour gasoline down into the carburetor. And they would say, "Adelante, time to go off," and off we would go. They also had a little Volkswagen bus, you know, the old Beetle buses.
Yeah.
And only second gear and reverse worked on that, and it used to have power steering but didn't anymore. And we came home, if you go on to photo number 5, please, we came home and found out that our church was in the process of selling this 9-year-old van that only had 32,000 miles on it, air conditioned. So I wrote them a note, wrote the letter to the Prudential Board at the church and said, "You know what, I'd like to meet the highest bid that wants to purchase the van from you, because I want to buy it and I want to take it down to the orphanage." And they called me that night after the meeting. They said, "We can't sell it to you. We'll give it to you." So the church donated the van, but they said the hitch is you got to bring it to the orphanage. Well, of course, that's not a problem. That's what we plan to do anyway. So it took us 6 months to figure out the paperwork to get in there, to find the right people that I had to be able to pay in Mexico. And they finally called me, and by the way, we had mechanical problems. I ended up putting about $3,000 back into the van because I couldn't bring them a problem. So what happened was they called and they said, "Well, the good news is we found a way to end the country. The bad news is they're changing the laws in 3 weeks and you have to come now." This was in February. Originally when we got it, we decided, hey, we'll drive around the country. This is, you know, we're paying for all this. We'll stop and visit your friends here and over there. And we were going to make a big adventure out of it. But the van was still in the garage. Friday night, I got it out of the garage Friday night at 6 o'clock. And I came home, I drove down to Grapevine Road, turned around, okay, we got the ABS brakes fixed. We were going to leave Saturday, but there was a major nor'easter due. So I come back to the house and I said to my wife, "We got to go." We threw the bags in the car and headed off.
On Friday night.
Huh?
On Friday night.
On a Friday night, and the snow stayed with us all the way down through Tennessee. And we got down into Guadalajara. And my wife was a GPS all the way. She never missed a turn through the whole thing. We get down and we're in Guadalajara in the middle of a boulevard, in the middle of the 3-lane boulevard. And at every stoplight, there's someone there to sell you marshmallows or windshield wiper blades or eating fire or something to get some money. And for the first time, we're lost. And we're still 3 hours from the orphanage and in Guadalajara, a place you don't want to get lost. And this young man came to the window and he said, "Doble a la derecha aquí para Colima. Turn right here for Colima." Okay, I said, "It's not possible," because there were buses in the other side. Another boy showed up, put up his hand, stopped the buses. We turned right. 150 yards down the road, there's a sign that says Colima, Route 54. I said to him, "How did he know?"
Yeah.
3 hours later, we drove into the orphanage, and come up to the next slide, please, if you would. Should be, yeah, there we go. We drove into the orphanage, and Lupita said she's had the children praying for us all the way. And I said, "I know, you sent me an angel in Guadalajara." I have no idea how that person to this day found that truck, how we picked out 2 non-Mexicans in a white van with no Colima or bus painted on it, and we headed over there, and it was there. So we put up the map, we showed the children where we went. You see the next slide, please? You'll see the children.
Before you put up the next slide, I have a question.
Yes.
You said that the Mexican government gives you no help whatsoever.
It doesn't give the CASA any help at all.
Okay. Do they cause any problems for you?
No. No, I do need to correct one thing. They do provide, we've built a, well, I should say we, the Padre built a school on campus. They do provide teachers, but that's the extent of it. There's no tax breaks.
So they don't
nothing.
give you a hard time about being an American down there?
No, I've never had any problems with that, because you know, I'm pretty low key. It's just my wife and I.
Yeah.
You know, we've used to bring groups down, but now it's just the 2 of us.
Oh, the groups don't go with you anymore?
No, it's just the 2 of us. No.
Do you ever feel a little bit afraid out there by yourselves, being the only Americans in that part of the country?
We never have.
Yeah.
There are some security issues, as you see in the news and all that,
Yeah.
but Colima is one of the safest states. It's Colima, like New York, New York.
Oh,
and,
okay.
and the borders of Colima have some issues, but right in Colima, we've never felt threatened. My wife and I get up every morning, we go for a walk. The neighbors now know us. One time we were there, we got there on a Thursday, Friday morning, we went down to El Centro, the downtown, and there's a huge riot going on. And as I looked at it, they've got free brazos, free hugs. There was a group of people that got together and they were pulling people out of the cars for a hug, and off they go.
You were lucky.
Yeah, well, there was nothing wrong. I mean, it was just, it was a fun
Well,
thing.
how close to the border is Colima? What part of Mexico is it?
Well, it's right in part of Mexico. It's about central Mexico, about 2 hours from the coast, near Manzanillo, which is about 2 hours away. So it's about middle of the continent. Yeah. So, and we're probably 150 miles from the border, where there were some issues.
A lot of issues, yeah.
Yeah, there have been.
So you don't have any problems, say, with drug dealers or?
No, no, we've never had a problem, and you know, you're careful where you walk, like you are in in our local area. You don't walk every area, and you go into Boston. There are some places where you just don't go, and there are places that we just don't go there. But we've walked everywhere we want to go. We have a great time with there, and have never felt threatened. Never been threatened. Never had an issue.
That's great.
So yeah. So we were on.
Back to your story about taking the van down.
Yeah. So we.
You got into a situation with the paperwork.
Oh, that's a different issue. Yeah, we had to bring it to the Registry of Motor Vehicles. When you pull into the Registry of Motor Vehicles, there are vendors that have set up on the periphery of the registry, so you know you're there for the day. So we went there.
What are the vendors selling?
Huh? Food for people because you got to spend the day at the registry. You're there for the whole day.
They don't want you to be hungry.
No, they don't want you to be hungry. Well, there's a way to make money. So anyway, it took us the entire day, and I got the paperwork that did legally transfer the car out of the orphanage to the orphanage, and the only thing I had to do was turn that into the government when I left at the airport. And on the way out, we got to the airport. I was there at 5 o'clock and was standing in line. Eventually, someone came out from the airlines and said, "Didn't they tell you?" I said, "Telling me what? The flight was canceled."
Oh, no.
So, but the good news is we have another flight for you. We got on the other flight, and I said, I'm going to get on the airplane, and I said, "Ma'am, I've got to take this to the customs folks." And they said, "Mr. Roy, the plane is leaving in 2 minutes. If you don't get on it, you're going to stay here in Mexico." So I said, so I ran, and I got on, and I sat down, and I said to the stewardess, "I got to get off the plane." She said, "Sit down." And I went home with the papers, so I never go without those papers.
This has been a really fascinating story, but I have a feeling that we're almost at the end of the show. So I think we should move it right along.
Yeah, let's move on, sure. Let's go on to, do you have
Number
a point?
15 we ought to get to.
You want to go to number 15?
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
I do want to go to, I want to go to number 11. And I'm going to bring up a key point. If you could bring up slide number 11, please. Typically when we go down there, I wait for a couple of days to figure out what projects we're going to work on. We never know what they are.
Yeah.
Lapita came to me the first morning. She said, "Necesito alimentos." She needed food. The organization that we talked about that supported them had skipped 2 months' worth of payments and reduced their funding by 80%. For the first time ever, the Casa Building Fund bought food for the kids. We were able to get that restored through a lot of work with myself and a couple other people, and we got the people down there and convinced them to restore some of the funding, but not the biggest amount.
This is the people in Florida.
These are the people in Florida. They've cut back their funding by 80%. Imagine trying to feed, 70 children on $2,500 a month.
Now, are there any people in the community that
They
you
do
can turn
have,
to?
yeah, there's an Association de Ayuda, which is an association of help that provides some help for them, but the majority of it comes from this organization in Florida.
Now, is there any way that they can grow their own food?
Oh yes, that was one of the slides. Unfortunately, we didn't get to. If you went to slide number, let's see, slide number 10. One of the things that we did do is we bought the material for a white house. We call it a greenhouse, but they call it white because they don't need any glass.
Oh, really?
And we put in an organic garden.
That's
So
great.
they do that. I got a grant from the First Church in Wenham to buy the watering system for this. And that's one of the great things about going down there is you go down and they keep going. They keep doing things, and it stays in place when
Well,
you
they
put it
can
there.
grow things all year
They've grown
round,
their
too.
own stuff, and that,
Yeah,
and you
that's
can see
great.
that there. If we
Yeah.
could go to slide
Better go
number
to 15, 'cause we're
slide
running
number
out.
15, and I'm sorry I got off on some of those other things, but
No,
you know, I get
that's
excited about
okay.
the
Yeah,
orphanage.
no, that's fine.
We collect funds on our own. Again, it's my wife and I. We do this, and 100% of the donations go to the orphanage. And our church is helping us out by providing a donation page on our website. If you go to BeverlySecond.com and go to worldwide, you'll find this page over there, and you'll be able to donate. If you designate Casa Building Fund, the money that I receive from that will go to the orphanage.
And
Every
all
penny.
of it goes to it?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we're going down next March. We're going to go down for another month. So we're right now in our fundraising. It's Christmas time. If people have an opportunity, they want a tax-deductible contribution, the church is a 501c3, and you're able to get that tax deduction by making a contribution to Second Congregational Church, and note down in the note section, Casa Building Fund.
Oh, that's great. It's great to know. I'm sure that there are people in the audience that would be very happy to donate.
Yeah, and we'd be grateful. It's
Certainly a
wonderful.
good cause.
It's terrific.
Yeah.
You know, it made a significant part of our life. My wife and I, fortunately, we both enjoy it to the same level. And we go down. We were talking today, and someone asked her, "If you're going to go to the orphanage again?" She says, "If I have to crawl, I'm going." You know.
You know, we were talking about the children and how the children are sometimes abandoned or dropped off. When somebody brings them, for instance,
Yes.
do they have paperwork?
Yes.
Paperwork is required for them to leave the children there?
There's an interview process that goes in to make
Okay.
sure that the children are indeed needy and qualified,
Right.
and there's someone in the staff that goes through that. I don't know all the details of it, Gail, but I do know that there's an intake process.
And when they come back, when these kids turn to 14 or 15, what is the process for them to take the child out of there?
Can I take my child home for Saturday?
Oh, okay. And that's it?
That's it. You don't see him again.
Oh,
You know.
that's very sad.
No, it is sad. It is. But, you know, we've got kids that Pepe has, you know, we've been mentoring him since 2000, and he's now in college in his second year.
Did you say that the school is on the premises?
The
Or do
school-
they go to school elsewhere?
There's two levels. Kindergarten, they walk to kindergarten class, which is about a mile and a half, and then grades 1 through 6 are on campus within 7 buildings that 7 rooms that within one of the 7 buildings. So the state teachers teach them there, and then from the 8, I think 1 through 6 is there. From 7 and beyond, the kids are bused. They'll take a public transportation to high school, and they go to school that way. And the CASA provides all the books and all the uniforms and everything. One of the things that we did do is we built a library, and I have the medical
great.
emergency fund that adds. We bought medicine.
Do you have doctors or nurses?
Well, there's a volunteer doctor
They're around?
that's on campus, and she came to me the second day I was there, and I asked her, "Is there anything you need?" And I had gotten a call 2 days before we left. I got a call and said, "Is it too late to make a contribution?" And I said, "Well, no, it's not." I said, "We're leaving tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock, and if I know what I have to work with, when I come home, if there's a check, I pay my credit card. And if there's no check, I pay my credit card, because I put everything on my credit card." And this woman said from the church in Swampscott, First Church in Swampscott, she said, "I'm going to send you $500. And I said, "Well, I'll accept it on one condition." Dead silence on the other end of the phone. She said, well, what's the condition? I said, you and I set a date where I come back and show you what I did with the $500 that you gave me. Fast
Great
forward,
idea, yeah.
fast forward, the doctor comes, says we need medicine. We went to the pharmacy, wrote it all up, and I handed over my credit card, just wondering what my credit card company is going to react when there's a $500 purchase. And honest to God, I got back and I changed it over from dollars to pesos. And I had a credit card slip this long, or the slip from the register this long, and 5 months worth of medications. It came to $495.68. I couldn't wait to get back to that church, hold up that piece of paper in front of them with a picture of the doctor buying the medicine.
It's a great story.
Yeah, true story. Yeah, it's just,
You might want to mention again the website. if
yeah, the
people wanna
website is
donate.
Beverly Second, www.beverlysecond.com. And if you go to the worldwide commitments on there, there's a tab. It brings you to the page, and you'll be able to make a contribution. If you need to make sure that you designate CASA Building Fund, and that way we'll get it.
Now, are you also looking for volunteers?
Right now, I've got a meeting scheduled for the 21st to go to discuss going. My church has not gone for 6 years because of security issues that are in Mexico.
Really?
We're having a meeting on the 21st, and folks are welcome to come to 35 Kona Street on the 21st at Beverly Church. We'll have the meeting at 11 o'clock to discuss taking another group of adults there next March. So,
Sounds
yeah,
like a great thing to do.
love to have them.
Yep. Well, we're almost out of time.
Okay, well, it's been wonderful.
and,
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and I commend you for what you're doing.
We love
you
it,
seem
Gail.
to love it, yeah.
Oh,
You do.
absolutely.
That's great.
Absolutely.
That's great. It would be nice if more people would get into things like that.
Yeah,
George, you have any last words?
Well, basically, I think that I've known so many guys at GE that retired, and they flunked retirement because they went back to work.
yeah.
And I think what too many people miss is this is your chance to do something different.
Yeah.
Do the things you always wanted to do but never
Yeah.
had the time.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think
great.
you're a prime example of how to pass retirement.
Yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful. The things we didn't get a chance to talk about is the fun we have with the children.
That's great.
Every night the kids come to our apartment and we play Jenga and dominoes, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, kids are fun to play with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Chuck, for being on the show, and we look forward to seeing you again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for
And
your time. I appreciate the
You're very
opportunity.
welcome. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you soon.